guys, what's up? Today is Sunday Anime Couple Review. As you guys always know, this segment is full of spoilers. We're gonna talk about Ichigo and Rukia, how they met. Their BACKSTORIES. Their respective others. Their tropes. Why I like they didn't get together. This is Ichigo Kurosaki. This is Rukia Kuchiki. Ichigo is our main character. In the first episode, he begins to outline his life. He is 15 years old and in the 10th grade. His family runs a clinic, and he has been able to see ghosts for as long as he can remember. Rukia is a soul initially born into a lower class. Rukia retains her modesty, even as an adopted member of the nobility. Rukia is a Shinigami, guardians of the souls who are going through the circle of transmigration. It is evening. They purify hollows who do evil in the world of the living. Kurosaki stands and in front of 5 skateboarding teenagers, the pluses, who have lost their way lying on the ground. By giving them a belligerent burial, Toshibro confronts him over kicking down Yamabro, who lies unconscious nearby, and telling them to get out of his way. When Ichigo does not respond, Toshibro demands he say something and angrily moves to punch him in the face. However, Ichigo nonchalantly kicks Toshibro in the face. And when the latter collapses, Ichigo continues to kick him in the back as his fellow skateboarders watch in horror. Ichigo directs the attention of the remaining skateboarders to the vase of flowers on the sidewalk behind him, which has been knocked over, and demands that Mipro tell him what that is, prompting Mipro to admit that it is a vase of flowers set up for a child who died in this location a couple days ago, which leads Ichigo to kick Mipro in the face as well while confirming this is correct. Ichigo asks the other 2 skateboarders why the vase is on its side, and when one of them reveals that they knocked it over while skateboarding, Ichigo kicks them both down before proclaiming that he will make sure people will have to put up flowers for their souls too if they ever do this. Again, screaming in terror, the skateboarders apologize and run away, prompting Ichigo to note that they likely will not return if he made them that afraid. When Ichigo turns around and promises to bring fresh flowers tomorrow, the dead girl that the flowers had been set up for appears and thanks him for getting rid of the skateboarders so she can rest in peace. After putting the vase of flowers back up, Ichigo tells the girl that she is welcome and that she should cross over soon before walking away while the girl fades from view. Walking through the front door of his house, Ichigo announces his arrival only to be kicked in the face by Isshin Kurosaki, his dad, who reprimands him for being late despite knowing dinner is always served at 7 p.m., declaring that he does not care what Ichigo's excuse is. Isshin proclaims that anyone who disturbs the peace and happiness of his household will be punished while he butts heads with Ichigo. As he and Ichigo begin sparring fiercely, Isshin demands to know if Ichigo is gloating over the fact that only he can touch and talk to ghosts, only for Ichigo to remind his father that he did not ask to be born like this. Yuzu Kurosaki tries to tell her brother and father to stop it, because dinner is getting cold. But Karen Kurosaki, Ichigo's other sister, tells her to leave them alone, before nonchalantly asking for more rice, prompting Yuzu to express concern over her lack of reaction. Irritated by this, Ichigo decides to just go to bed and leaves, while Karen blames Isshin for his reaction, prompting a bewildered Isshin to ask why. While Ichigo lies in his bed upstairs, calming down, Ichigo tries that he is having a rough time right now, slides into his feet, prompting Karen to note that Ichigo mentions seeing more spirits than ever as of late. When a shocked Isshin wonders why they both never tells him about such things, which leads Isshin to fall to the floor over 40 years old. But Ken only talks in an immature way and says that no one would ever want to confide in him, leading a tearful Isshin to ask the memorial poster of his wife what he should do. Seeing this, Karen tells him that he should take down the memorial poster to start with the next day. A reporter on television relays the news that the ground shook and the walls of many buildings were damaged 1 block away from the main street outside of Karakura Station at 7:30 a.m. this morning. As Karen and Yuzu eat breakfast in the dining room, Ichigo enters the room and greets them before asking where Ishin is, prompting Karen to reveal that he has a meeting and will not be home that night. Taking a piece of toast from the toaster, Ichigo acknowledges this before looking at the television while the reporter states that investigators are working to determine what happened. When Yuzu asks him what is wrong, Ichigo notes that the incident took place near their house shortly afterward. Ichigo walks past the site of the incident with fresh flowers in his bag and arrives at the street with the dead girl's memorial site, where he calls out for her. However, upon hearing a scream and a strange roar from afar, a startled Ichigo begins running toward the source of the sound, elsewhere in the city. A woman wonders what that sound was before screaming, when another explosion occurs nearby and giant claw marks are dug into the side of a building. As the civilians flee, Ichigo runs past them toward the ongoing incident. Upon being engulfed in a cloud of smoke, Ichigo sees a large masked monster standing in the midst of the destruction. To his confusion, suddenly the dead girl runs toward him while calling out, leading Ichigo to tell her to run while they begin fleeing together. With the monster in pursuit, the dead girl asks Ichigo what it is, prompting him to admit that he does not know before tripping and falling on the ground. As Ichigo runs back to help her up, the monster catches up to them and moves to attack. Suddenly, while Ichigo sees a Jigakuch fly in front of his face, Shinigami Jigokek. Hell butterfly are black butterflies used by Shinigami to serve a variety of purposes. They guide the Shinigami when traveling between Soul Society and the human world. Jigakuch are also used as messengers among Shinigami, often carrying important orders. Rukia appears in front of the monster and unsheathes her zanpakuts before slashing the monster's mouth with blood spurting from the wound. Rukia lands on the ground before leaping toward the monster once more and cutting through its entire body vertically from the head down, causing it to disintegrate and disappear. When Rukia lands before him and the dead girl, while sheathing her zanpakuts, a stunned Ichigo tries to get her attention, only for Rukia to briefly look at him before walking away. That night, as Ichigo lies in bed, he notes to himself that he cannot figure out what happened earlier that day. Sees another Jigakuch fly in front of him. A shocked Ichigo civilians begin returning to the scene room on top of his and desk wondering what happened. Who she is. Ichigo sees when that the Rukia girl has disappeared and looks ahead in Ichigo asks with trepidation what she wants. Sirens fill the air while emergency services respond and arrive at the scene of the incident, only to be interrupted when Ichigo angrily kicks her in the back while demanding to know what she is talking about. As she lies on the floor, a stunned Rukia asks Ichigo if he can see her and notes that he just kicked her, wondering what Rukia is talking about. Ichigo confirms that he can see her while Rukia gets to her feet and realizes Ichigo was the one who was present when she defeated the monster earlier. Rukia notes that people cannot usually see her, prompting Ichigo to tell her to stop talking nonsense before attempting to kick her again. However, Rukia effortlessly dodges his kick and leaps off his leg before pushing Ichigo to the ground with a foot to the head. However, Rukia effortlessly dodges his kick and leaps off his leg before pushing Ichigo to the ground with a foot to the head, while Ichigo expresses irritation at this. Rukia solemnly informs him that she is a Shinigami. Meanwhile, the dead girl runs down the street while thundering footsteps echo behind her and wonders where it is coming from as the telephone lines are torn apart, revealing a large monster with their surge of electricity. Seeing this, the dead girl continues to run away while large footsteps appear in the ground behind her. Back at the Kurosaki clinic, Ichigo recounts Rukia's explanation that she is a Shinigami sent from Soul Society to exorcise demons like the one who attacked the dead girl earlier. A surprised Rukia asks if he really does not believe in Shinigami, despite being able to see ghosts, which Ichigo confirms before elaborating that he has never seen a Shinigami before, and does not believe in what he cannot see. When Rukia points out that he is seeing her right now, Ichigo admits that she is clearly not human, before telling her to stop playing Shinigami and calling her a pipsqueak as he grabs her head. Angered by this, Rukia uses Bakud number 1, Sai, causing Ichigo's hands to be bound behind his back while he falls forward in surprise, and demands to know what Rukia did to him, taunting Ichigo over his inability to move. Rukia explains that this is Kidder, a high-level spell that only Shinigami can use, and reveals that she has lived 10 times longer than Ichigo despite her appearance. While an angered Ichigo curses her and her attitude, he is shocked when Rukia pulls out her Zanpakuts and brings it down, only to see her press the end of its hilt against the forehead of the glasses-wearing plus that had been hanging around him. The plus begs her to not send him to hell, but Rukia assures him that he is instead going to Soul Society and that it is a restful place. Once Rukia removes the hilt from his forehead, leaving a shining emblem on it, the plus clasps his hands and smiles as he sinks into the floor in blue light. A confused Ichigo asks Rukia what happened to the soul, prompting her to reiterate that she sent him to Soul Society, which is referred to as passing over in the human world, and decides to take the time to explain it to him so that he fully understands, pulling out a sketchbook and marker. Rukia explains that there are 2 types of spirits in the world, pluses: the normal spirits that Ichigo normally sees, and hollows, evil spirits that attack both the living and the dead to devour their souls. Rukia details how Shinigami have 2 jobs. The first is to send pluses to Soul Society with cons, as she just did, while the second is to purify hollows, as she did earlier that day. While Fishbone D pursues the dead girl through the streets elsewhere in town, Ichigo asks Rukia why the hollow she purified earlier was pursuing the dead girl, prompting Rukia to admit that she does not know because Soul Society has yet to grasp everything about hollows. While the dead girl trips and falls to the ground, Fishbone D reaches out to grab her, but suddenly stops short and notes that he can smell an especially tasty soul nearby, alongside that of a Shinigami. Standing up, Fishbone D begins walking in a different direction and roars, causing the windows nearby to explode. Hearing this, a startled Ichigo asks Rukia what that was. A startled Ichigo tells her to hurry up and get rid of it, only for Rukia to admit that she has not been able to sense it recently and theorize that there is a powerful force obstructing her senses within the same area. However, Ichigo demands to know if she cannot hear the terrible cries outside and if this is not the hollow she is after, prompting a confused Rukia to state that she does not know what Ichigo is talking about before, stopping in shock as she suddenly hears Fishbone D's roar from afar. Upon hearing a crash below and Yuzu screaming, Rukia runs to the door and opens it, only to stop in shock when she suddenly feels Fishbone D's powerful Reiatsu. An injured Yuzu calls out to Ichigo and stumbles through the hall, before falling in front of Ichigo's door, reaching out to Ichigo. Yuzu reveals something happened to Karen and begs him to save her as she falls unconscious, while kneeling down to check on Yuzu. Rukia hears Karen crying in pain and runs downstairs while a distraught Ichigo gets to his knees. Rukia reaches the ground floor, where she sees Fishbone D holding Karen. Rukia tells Ichigo to stay back, but he instead stands up while calling out to Karen, prompting Rukia to express surprise at him being able to move. Despite the binding spell placed on him, Ichigo begins screaming in anger and straining against his invisible binds, prompting Rukia to warn him that no human strength can break them. While several floating kanji appear around him, and his restraints become visible, Ichigo glows with golden light before completely shattering his bonds, with Rukia left shocked by a human like Ichigo, breaking through a spell with his own power. Ichigo grabs a folding chair and runs forward to attack Fishbone D. As Ichigo is sent flying back, Fishbone approaches him and declares that he has found Ichigo before reaching for him, only for Ichigo to roll away while Rukia cuts deep into Fishbone D's right arm. Roaring in pain, Fishbone D drops Karen, who is caught by Ichigo, and disappears from view. Rukia sternly tells him to compose himself, because Fishbone D has not yet devoured his sister's souls. To his surprise, Rukia reveals that Ichigo is the target of the hollows. Rukia theorizes that Ichigo's power began pouring out due to his contact with the dead girl, and that the hollows sensed his power through that same girl, which makes him their real target. While a stunned Ichigo processes this, Fishbone D reappears in front of Rukia, prompting her to tell Ichigo to stay back. However, he tells her to shut up and asks if it is his fault that the dead girl was attacked and that his sister's lives are in danger. Ichigo yells and runs in front of Fishbone D, whom he asks if he is after Ichigo's power before demanding that the hollow fight him one-on-one. Rukia intercepts Fishbone D's attack with her body, damaging Fishbone D's mouth in the process. As Fishbone D rears back in pain, Rukia falls to her knees while blood trails behind her, berating a shocked Ichigo for not realizing he would be no match for Fishbone D. Rukia asks if he thought everything would be over if he gave the hollow his soul before stating that they will all become food for him at this point. Rukia pulls herself to a nearby pole and asks Ichigo if he wants to save his family, which Ichigo immediately confirms before asking if there is a way to do so. She declares he must become a Shinigami, detailing how Ichigo must be stabbed by her Zanpakuts so she can pour her powers into him. Rukia admits that she does not know if this will work before asserting that there is nothing else they can do. Ichigo tells Rukia to give him her Zanpakuts and addresses her as a Shinigami, prompting Rukia to tell him her name. Ichigo grabs Rukia's Zanpakuts by the blade and introduces himself in turn, before pulling the blade into himself while Rukia pushes, resulting in a powerful surge of energy. Ichigo defeats Fishbone D after taking all of Rukia's Shinigami powers, with Ichigo having successfully gained Shinigami powers and a large Zanpakuts of his own. A stunned Rukia, now clad in a white Shiakusho, notes that Ichigo took all of her power. Ichigo cuts off Fishbone D's right leg and declares that he will pay for hurting his family before slashing through the hollow's mask, causing Fishbone D to disintegrate and disappear, with Ichigo confidently standing on the street afterward. Now, these to have respective others, so I'm gonna tell you a little about them. Renji Abare. Abare Renji is the lieutenant of the 6th Division under Captain Rukia Kuchiki. He's the best friend of Rukia. They are inseparable, having been together since they were orphans. Orihime Inoue. She is one of Ichigo Kurosaki's friends. Like the many other characters in the series, she quickly develops spiritual powers of her own after Ichigo becomes a Soul Reaper. Throughout the series, Orihime learns about Ichigo's duty as a Soul Reaper and accompanies him when they go to the Soul Society to save Rukia Kuchiki. After Rukia ends with consequences of letting Ichigo be Shinigami, Ichigo's tropes are birds of a feather. Ichigo develops a deep and meaningful connection with his dearest companions, forging an unbreakable bond with Rukia in the first 2 arcs. Ichigo and Rukia experience intense guilt over their inability to save individuals from powerful hollows. For Ichigo, his failure to rescue his mother weighs heavily on him, and for Rukia, having to kill her commanding officer after he was taken over by a hollow during the Soul Society arc. Rukia also feels guilty about Ichigo's supposed death at the hands of Byakuya and pleads with Yamamoto to spare Ichigo and his friends during their rescue mission to prevent her execution as her last request. Meanwhile, Ichigo's guilt stems from the fact that Rukia is facing execution for giving him her Soul Reaper powers to save them both after he acted recklessly and caused her injury. These feelings of guilt drive both characters throughout the Soul Society arc. Mistaken for romance, his platonic friendship with Rukia tended to be mistaken for a romantic relationship. But this has not been revisited since Orheim's abduction by Ulquiorra. The anime's filler plays with it much more. Vitriolic best buds, almost all of Ichigo's closest relationships are based on this trope with the exception of Sato and Orheim. Ichigo and Rukia argue a lot. Rukia will punch Ichigo and shout if it means restoring his resolve, and Ichigo will snark about her attitude and her bizarre taste in art. Would hit a girl he didn't hesitate to hit Izan during his rescue of Rukia when fighting a group of female Sternritter to protect a battered Kenpachi. He comments that fighting girls turned out to be hardly any different from fighting guys. He also kicks Rukia in the very beginning. Everyone can see it happens frequently in the manga. First, during the Substitute Shinigami arc, people assume that Rukia, who lives in Ichigo's closet and is frequently dragging him out of class to fight hollows, is his girlfriend. Later, when men from the Rukon district urge Orheim to take a break from healing Jidanbo's arm, she walks alongside Ichigo and they assume he's her boyfriend. Now for Rukia's tropes. At the beginning of the story, as a consequence of transferring her power to Ichigo, Rukia found herself borderline depowered. This did not translate on her automatically leaving everything to Ichigo, as she insisted on guiding him and doing her best to help him fight and defend her. Despite being the heroine and an overall skilled fighter, Rukia is, for roughly 3/4 of the series, a rank-and-file Soul Reaper who didn't even qualify for a seated officer position. Belligerent sexual tension, subverted. While Rukia and Ichigo have an acerbic relationship that belies their tight bond, mocking her drawings is a good way to elicit a violent response out of her. Ichigo is usually the one to press it, break the cutie, while waiting for execution. Rukia reminisces over why she deserves to die for being responsible for the death of her mentor, Kaien Shiba, who Ichigo resembles. Dark and troubled past, Rukia worshipped her mentor, Kaien Shiba. However, when Kaien was taken over by an experimental hollow, she was forced to kill Kaien to save both herself and her captain. She was unable to forgive herself for decades until Ichigo gave her the chance to face up to her past. These main tropes are why I'm glad that Ichigo and Rukia didn't end up together, and personally, watching the anime, I always thought they had more of a brother and relationship, close friendship. It didn't have a more respectful tone to the relationship in general anyway, so yeah. That's why I preferred Renji and Rukia, Ichigo and Orheim, because it basically set a tone of switching around who you think could be the main couple. Alright, that's the end of my Sunday anime couple review.